You're listening to the Resilient Author Podcast, the show that goes beyond the pages to explore the grit, courage, and resilience it takes to write and publish a book. I'm your host, Carrie Human, and each week I sit down with authors to uncover the stories behind their stories, the challenges they faced, the breakthroughs they experienced, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. Whether you're working on your first chapter or celebrating your launch, this is the place to find inspiration and practical takeaways for your own author journey. Let's dive in. All right, Teri. So let's start by just giving the listeners a little bit of context. For those who may not know you yet, what's 10 Little Rules for a Double-Butted Adventure about? And what do you hope readers take away from your story?
Yeah, so 10 Little Rules for Double-Butted Adventure is about my cross-country trip on a tandem bicycle with my husband from the coast of Oregon to Washington, D.C. So we rode 3,102 miles on a tandem bicycle. This is not a motorcycle. This is not a car. These are with our feet. I was asked many times, was it an e-bike? The answer is no, it was just us. And we did it for a variety of reasons, which I'll get into in a little while if you ask. And the book itself isn't really a day by day blow. If you want that, I kept a blog. You're welcome to go to my website. You can find it there. But this is about life lessons I learned while on this journey. You take a journey like this and it's big and it's hard and it's bold, and I'm not an athlete and I hadn't been on a bicycle in 40 years when we made the decision this is what we were going to do. So for me, it was really, really huge. And I learned a lot about myself and about life while on this trip. And so I wrote those down. I didn't even know I was writing them down. I wrote them down as part of my blog. And as I went over my blog when we got home, I realized, look at this, I have these little pearls. And that's what the book became.
I really love just the spontaneity, and we'll get into it. But most books begin as a spark. It's an idea.
Right.
Where did the idea for the book come from? Was there a particular moment on your ride, or what was the gestation of it?
Always knew I would write something. But I felt that I was probably going to write more of a how-to, like, how to ride a tandem bicycle across the United States without killing your husband, that kind of a book, right? Or maybe even how to gather the equipment, or how to prepare for a big adventure or something like that. I expected it to be more along that line. But when we get back, so we finish up this ride. And it was hard in my mind to piece it together because we did not ride from the coast of Oregon to Washington, D.C. We rode Wednesday, and then we rode Thursday, and then we rode Friday. And when you were riding Friday, you didn't think about Thursday and you didn't think about Saturday. You only thought about that day. And then you put it away and you rode the next day. And somehow all of those added up to going across the United States. And it was really hard to make my mind believe it. It was like, yes, I remember being in Montana. I remember, but did we really make it the whole way across? And so I think as part of my trying to make it feel real, I went back and read the blog. And it was while I was reading the blog that I would say, oh my gosh, that's an aha moment. And then I marked it down. And before long, I had this list of these life valuable lessons. And I thought, that's my book. And that touched me more than a how-to. I'm not a how-to writer. I can be, I've done it, but it isn't what sends me. It's not what makes me excited about life. And so if mine had been a how-to, it was going to have to be full of antidotes and other things anyway. And instead, this is what it needed to be. It was a how-to, but how to live an adventurous life. How to allow yourself outside of the bubble that we put ourselves in, or the walls that we create for ourselves, how to get beyond that. So that's what it turned out to be.
I can really appreciate just sort of taking it day by day, being in the moment. Was there any preparation that you all had to really get yourselves into, or did you just get on the bike and go?
Oh, no. So I had not been on a bicycle in 40 years. So there is no way that someone who's not been on a bicycle in 40 years just hops on a bicycle and rides across the United States. So for a little over a year, we did training rides. I had to find the right saddle to sit on, which, believe it or not, was a huge endeavor. You'd think you just go, you buy one, but there are all different kinds. They fit differently. Some are wider, some are thinner. There were several that I tried that would hit this horrible spot that would make my leg completely go numb. It's like you can't ride across the United States that way. And so there was all of that. There was finding the right clothing, what was going to work in a situation in which you're sweating, but you also don't want to be completely directly with the sun baking on you all the time. So like, what clothing are we going to wear? What can I wear that I can peel off and put back on as temperatures change throughout the day? All of those things. And then even just my husband and I learning how to ride together, because you don't ride a tandem separately. We had to ride together, and it's more than just pedaling together. People are like, oh yeah, you have to pedal together. It was like, that was the easy part. The hard part is stopping together, starting together, letting the other person know when you're tired, can't do anymore. Like being able to have all of that communication that says, look, I'm running out of steam and I'm going to need us to stop. Do you see that tree up there? That's as far as I'm going. Like to be able to do all of that. But you can't just get on a tandem bicycle and ride. It's not like I just throw my leg over and we go. He has to throw his leg over and he has to hold the bike still. And then I get on and I get my left foot in, and then he gets his left foot in, and then we count to 3, and then we push forward with our right feet. Like there's this whole, it's like a dance that you have to do in order to get the bike going. And so, yeah, we did a lot of practice before we felt confident that we could get all the way across the United States like that.
Wow. I'm just trying to imagine what that must have been like. I know in general, just traveling with a partner can be very, very challenging.
Yes.
You get to learn a lot about a person. Did you and your husband already have a pretty good track record of traveling, or was this challenging for you too, just
This
emotionally?
was challenging. My husband and I had been married exactly 15 months when we went out on this trip.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when we conceived of the idea, we were dating, we got married. We thought we weren't going to be able to go because COVID came about, and we ended up riding during the summer of COVID. So for a while we thought we weren't going to be able to go, but no, we really were very much, people said that we did well because we were newlyweds, but we were actually kind of just beyond the newlywed phase. Like we'd been married over a year at this point. And so, I could definitely point out everything about him that I found annoying, and he could do the same. It wasn't like we were still in the stage. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of tough because we learned a lot about each other while on this ride. I am, so I'm, I don't know how to put it. I am emotional. That's just who I am. Everything that I experience is big. I'm either smiling or I'm crying. There's always something. And when I see something beautiful, I'm that person. Bruce is an engineer. He just is. He's very solid and very just solid. And so there isn't a lot of this up and down. And then there's me. And so on day like 3 or 4, it was a hard day. And I'm standing on the side of the road during one of our breaks and I'm sobbing. It's hot. And I'm crying, and and he doesn't know what to do. You can see the look on his face. Like, I think the trip might be over. I think she's done, like she's crying. And so he tried to console me, and I didn't want him near me because I don't know if you have women in your life, but they tend to say they think you can speak. And that's what I did, right? And he just was standing there with the wide eyes. He got it out of my system, and I said, all right, let's go. And he looked at me and he said, what? And I said, well, we can't stay here. We have 8 more miles before we get to where we're stopping today. We can't stop here. And the only way to get there is to ride. Come on, let's go. And he learned that's just how I have to do it. I've got the big emotions. I have to get them out. I have to figure out their place. And then once I've settled it, well, now I can be rational. And I can go ahead and say, well, the only way to get to where we're going is to ride the bike. So we need to get on it. That's the next thing to do. So we learned a lot about one another. We also learned how to not hold on to a grudge. because I can tell you that riding a tandem bicycle with someone you're not happy with is not a pleasant experience. And we did it one morning and it was horrible. And I just told him I wasn't getting back on the bike.
Mm.
And he said, what? And I said, not until we fix this. And so he said, fine, let's fix it. I said, no, you don't sound ready yet. And I just kind of walked away and went and sat down. And about 10 minutes later, he came over and he said, all right, let's fix it. And we did. We talked about, I think I had said something kind of snarky and he took it far worse than I had intended him to. I'm sure I meant for him to feel the snark, but I don't think I meant for him to feel it that way. And we talked about it. And I said, I'm tired and you're tired. And I would love to say that I'll never be that way again, but I know me and I'm going to, and I'm going to do my best not to. But instead of holding it in and being angry, go ahead and say to me, did you mean that? Because we can fix it right away instead of riding this way. And so, yeah, it was like 20 years of marriage shoved into 3.5 months.
I was gonna say, it sounds like tandem bike therapy. Wow, that's powerful. Speaking of emotions, getting from inspiration to completion, rarely happens in a straight line. And, like you said, yours involved emotional and physical pain or terrain, I should say. What was the biggest obstacle or doubt that you faced while writing the book, and how did you move through it?
While writing the book, I think that, my biggest doubt often when I'm writing, so I have 3 novels and then this book and a children's book. And my biggest doubt is can I do it? Like I still have imposter syndrome that I shouldn't have. Like if we look over what I've achieved, I should be able to say I'm a good author and I don't need to worry about this anymore. But that isn't what happens, because it's like, well, yeah, maybe for that, maybe for this. Well, that was a fluke. If they really knew, they saw how I wrote, all the things that we do. So I think for me, it was that. The really interesting thing is I had written up like my first draft of what I thought maybe the book was going to be like, but then I didn't know what to do with this. And I didn't know who to contact for it. I didn't feel like I wanted it with just any publisher. I felt like it needed a home, but I didn't know where that home was. And I met someone that 10 Little Rules, her name is Carol, and she has 10 Little Rules Publishing. And we talked and chatted, not about my book, about a book she had written. And she was on my podcast and everything. And I felt like my book would be such a good fit, but she didn't say anything to me. So I didn't say anything to her. And for 6 months, I kept thinking my book belongs there. But I was terrified to reach out to her because I kept thinking if she wanted the book, because she knew I had written things, etc. If she wanted it, she would have asked me. Well, what's crazy is she was sitting in Michigan saying, oh, I wish Teri wanted me as her publisher. And so we were both doing that. And so I think that's the hardest thing, is just kind of getting over that inertia. I finally just wrote her a very quick email without thinking, like just, hey, Carol, I've got this idea for a book. Just wondering if it's something you'd be interested in. Thanks, Teri, send. And then it was like, oh, why did I do that? Well, within 3 minutes, I get this message back. Absolutely. Let's talk. Can you meet on Friday?
Love it.
And I was like, oh, okay. But I think that's the hardest thing. It's just believing in yourself enough to take it to whatever the next step is, whatever that is. I mean, some people kind of get stuck after the first draft. Some people get stuck in the editing. Some people get stuck where I did, which was finding a publisher. And so wherever that step is, I think that the way through that is, take a deep breath and just do it.
Just do it. Yeah.
Just do it. Yeah. My philosophy is now, it's what I tell myself when I'm having trouble doing whatever the next step is currently. And so in this case, currently you have no publisher. If you ask Carol and Carol says no, you still have no publisher, right? Nothing bad has happened. My world did not end. There's not going to be catastrophe. I'm not going to lose my house. My children aren't going to ditch me. I'm just not going to have a publisher, which I already don't have. If, however, Carol says yes, then I have a publisher. And so I do that a lot. I'll do that like when I'm trying to go into a bookstore that I want to have my books in that store.
Mm.
And going in, I don't know, it just like, oh, I don't want to do this. And it's like, okay, currently you do not have books in this bookstore. Worst possible scenario is you walk out with no books in that bookstore.
Mm.
That's kind of how I get through those.
Mm. I really appreciate that mindset. It's like you have nothing, you really don't have anything to lose. It's really, you have
Right.
everything to gain at that point.
Right. Right. And I think that the reason that we don't put ourselves on the line is it does feel like a loss when someone says no.
Mm.
And that's why I reframe it to be, I already have a no.
Mm.
The no is currently happening because my books are not where I want them to be, or I don't have that publisher, or, I'm not working with this particular podcast host, or whatever it is.
Mm.
I've already got the no.
Mm.
I might get a yes.
Might get a yes. It's worth a shot.
Yeah.
Worth a shot. So for a book like this, Teri, what kind of research do you do for a book like this? And I'm also curious, did your partner help with writing at all? Was he involved in the process?
Okay, so I didn't have to do much research for this book. Every now and then I did have to go back and verify town names, how far a distance was, something like that. This book, because I lived it, I was very intimately involved in it, and it was my feelings, and I didn't have a whole lot to research, which is a shame because I love research. My novels are all historical fiction, and I love research, and I do a lot of research for those. Bruce did not do a lot in helping me write it. He did help with a few memories. I would read my blog posts and I would think, I kind of remember, but I'm not full on those details. And I could ask him and he could maybe fill me in on and be like, oh, I do remember that day better. Okay, that helps. Bruce very much wanted to write a book about like getting ready for this adventure and the kinds of things that you would need to take and what not to take, etc. Unfortunately, in June of 22, my husband was diagnosed with glioblastoma, which is an incurable brain cancer, and he passed away in January. So he passed away just under a month before this book came out. So he never actually got to see it published. He got to see all of the coming up to it, but he never got to see it published. So he didn't get to write that book that he wanted to write. And so who knows, maybe someday I will sit down and try to do that. Although I am not the cyclist he was. He was the perfect person to write that kind of book. And I was the perfect person to write this was really hard, and here's some things I learned about it. So.
Yeah, it puts it in perspective, just life and just how precious it can be. And, the opportunity you two had, as you mentioned, your story is so much more than the ride. It's also about rebuilding after loss, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Like how did writing this book help to shape you personally, your confidence, your outlook, or even the way you define freedom and adventure?
I think for me, prior to going on this ride, I had met Bruce. I was never getting married again. I had been in a very bad marriage. It was 14 years of emotional abuse. I was never, ever, ever, ever doing that again. Bruce he tells everyone that he chased me until I caught him. So if you can figure that out, that's what he did. What he really did was he just was around. He just kept being there until I finally got used to him and recognized that he really was the person he said he was, that he, when he said he was going to do something, he did it, and that I could count on him. And after a while, it was like, okay, now I believe you. So when I went on this ride, I was pretty broken. I felt better than I had in a long time, but I still didn't really believe in myself. It was at the end of the ride when we'd gone 3,102 miles. We're coming up on the last hill. And by the way, just so you know, everything ends up. If you have a last mile of the day, it's going to be up. I do not understand why, but it is always up. And it was that way at the very end. And we were going up a hill we stopped at the Marine Corps Memorial. My husband was a 25-year veteran, and we were raising money for Toys for Tots. So it was a perfect place to stop. We're going up this hill. He says, do you see that flag? I said, yeah. He said, that's it. That's where we're stopping. That's the memorial. And I started to laugh and cry. And I was a big emotional mess. Then I thought, just rode across the United States on a tandem bicycle.
Mm.
Literally do anything I put my mind to. It is not a matter of can I do it, but what do I want to do? And I thought, I want to be an author.
Mm.
So the ride itself propelled me forward to become the author that I wanted to be. This was not my first book. I wrote 3 novels before this book came out because I just had trouble finding where I was going to put this book. But the crazy thing about when this came out, you figure I had it all set up to come out. And then my husband passed away on January 10th. This book was set out to come out February 14th, barely a month later. And part of me really wanted to say, it can't come out then. Let's hold it. I'll do it later. And the rest of me was like, no, he would be very disappointed in you if you didn't, continue moving forward. And so I went ahead and let the book come out. And within 2 weeks of his passing, I started getting on podcasts and I started talking about the book. And it has been probably the best therapy for me because the end of a cancer journey is never pretty. And it wasn't pretty. I mean, it just wasn't. And so here we are trying to, navigate that whole ugly scene. He passes away. And what is my memories of him? But these yucky days that weren't good and that our life didn't look good. And then 2 weeks later, I got on my first podcast and got to talk about this unbelievable thing that we did together. And it has changed everything for me because now instead of the end as my focus, this ride is my focus, this huge adventure that we did, this life-changing, life-altering thing that we did. So it has been a complete blessing that it came out when it came out.
Wow. I'm just trying to let that sit in, Teri. Wow. This podcast is called The Resilient Author, and, resilience shows up differently for everyone. Sometimes it's discipline, sometimes it's faith, sometimes it could just be stubbornness. What would you say helped you to just keep going, during this process, whether it was the ride or just when things got tough in general with the book, losing your husband, like what has kept you going?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stubbornness. I think that's probably a lot of it. I also I have a belief that everything turns out okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end. And so that keeps you kind of pushing forward, looking for when it's okay again. And we did that on the ride. Part of the thing that we did for the ride that helped us tremendously is we made it more than about us. We made it about the kids that we were raising money for Toys for Tots. And our goal was to make sure that every child in our neighborhood and our community, in our Toys for Tots community, who asked for a bicycle could get one. And that was a big deal because kids ask for bikes and bikes are not donated very often. And we don't get enough money to give every child a bike that asks for one. And that year we did. We got every child that wanted a bicycle, got a bicycle, and every organization that asked for help with kids got the help that they needed. So it was a beautiful thing. So there were days, usually I was up and he was down, or he was up and I was down. Very rarely were we down together. But if we were down both at the same time, the kids kept us going. So I think sometimes having an exterior motivator that's bigger than you is one thing that can make you resilient. Sometimes it's stubbornness. My brother told me that I would never make it because I couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time. So part of me, I told my husband after that comment, I said, I don't care if you have to tie me to the bicycle, I am making it all the way across the United States. So there is a little bit of the stubborn in it. And then I think that the other thing is that, I don't know, one of my rules is do hard things. And it's the rule that I have really been holding on to since Bruce has passed. I'll lay in bed and think, I don't want to do this day. And it's do hard things, Teri. And I throw my legs over the side of the bed and I get up and I do it. And I think sometimes it's just that, I don't know, like there's just something in you that says, I can do this hard thing. I have belief in myself enough to know that I can do it. And I believe it's worth it. And so, off you go. So I don't know. I think it's like a combination of things, strong faith, just lots of things. Yeah.
Would you say you're wired that way, or would you say it's something that has gradually happened over time?
I think I was wired that way. And then I think it got buried underneath lots of life and lots of crap and lots of things. And that the ride itself helped me find it again. And now I'm very determined not to ever lose it again. You know, I know that I'm capable. I've shown that I'm capable. If I ever doubt that I'm capable, all I have to do is say you rode 3,102 miles across the United States. You took a tandem bicycle over the Rocky Mountains. You can do this, right? And I think I had it as a younger person. I believed in myself fully. I was sure I probably was very conceited. I mean, I believed I could do anything. But the world knocks that out of you. I never worry about seeing a conceited child because I know the world will knock that. I mean, you know, by the time they're 16, they're not going to feel quite the same anymore about themselves. And you know, you don't want to get rid of that too early. Let them feel really confident for a while. So I think I had it. And then the world just kind of slowly but surely, and then 14 years in this relationship that was so bad, and it just had completely disappeared. But I think we all have it in us. It's just, do we know where to look for it?
That's the question. Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of just having that in us and knowing where to look, you know, a lot of the listeners right now are, you know, carrying a story of their own, but haven't started yet. It's still just sort of in that process of, can I get it out? Can I write this? What advice would you give to writers or aspiring writers who are struggling to take just that first step to just start getting their story out?
I think, you know, this will sound very trite, and I don't mean it to be, but just start writing. You'll never get better at it by thinking about it. You'll never get better at it by reading about it. You'll never get better at it by taking a class on it. You actually have to do it. It would be like me saying, oh, I'm going to get really good at tennis because I'm going to think about it for 15 minutes every day. I can promise you I will not be good at tennis. I mean, that isn't something that's natural to me. And so I would have to go do it. I would have to take lessons. I would have to practice and practice and practice. And for every 1 hour of lesson, I would have to do 15 hours of practice just to make sure that I could get that lesson down. And that's what I'm going to say is don't wait. Don't wait for the perfect time. Don't wait until you're going to be better at it. Go ahead and get started. It doesn't matter if it's bad. Picasso's first painting, I'm sure, was terrible. We don't get to see it because he painted over it, but I'm confident that the very first time he picked up a paintbrush that it was not beautiful. You know, he was still learning how to hold that paintbrush, how to get the paints onto the brush correctly, what colors he was supposed to use. All of those things he had to figure out. And it's the same thing with writing. So go ahead and get started now. It doesn't mean that you're going to write your masterpiece today. But try something small. Try a quick short story. Try 2 or 3 paragraphs that explain one thing. If you're writing a novel, give me a 2-page synopsis about your character. You know, tell me what your character ate for breakfast this morning. I mean, just play little games like that where you're writing and you're learning about the craft of writing.
I love that. Picasso painting over his first painting. I'd imagine if someone found that, it would probably be worth a lot of money today, no matter how.
It would be now. But at the time, I'm sure he looked at it and thought, this is trash, right? I mean, I know I feel that way about my very first manuscript. The first thing that I ever wrote, it's no good. It's not going to see the light of day. And if it does, it will be so radically changed that it isn't going to look anything at all like that first manuscript because I didn't know what I was doing, but I wrote it. And guess what it taught me? It taught me I had 50,000 words in me. That was a pretty big accomplishment. I wrote 50,000 words of a story that had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and characters. It's pretty darn good. Now, was it a good story? Had maybe decent bones, you know. But how do you get better? There's one author, and I don't remember who. There's so many people that claim it was them that said it, but there was an author who said you can't edit a blank page. And that is so true. You can't learn to be a better author if you don't ever put anything down on the paper. So you've got to put it down because only then can you look at it and say, that's horrible, and this is what I need to do to fix it. And then you can try again. And when you try again, you're going to find that that's probably almost as horrible. And then you're going to try again. And you do that until all of a sudden you start thinking, I think I might have something here. And then that's when you do step 2, which is you find someone who is going to be kind and honest. So not someone who just says, well, this is crap, because that doesn't help you, but someone who can tell you, here's what you're doing well. I like this part. And this right here is concerning to me. I'm not following here, or I wish I had more here, or whatever. It seems really slow right here, whatever it is. And then take that information and now use it to make it better.
Yeah, that's solid. You cannot edit a blank page. I like that a lot. So just to...
Rich author that said it, but we're going to say it was me. So
yeah, it sounds good coming out of your mouth, Teri. So we'll go with that. Just to double click on what you just said, if you could leave, one piece of advice or just encouragement with our listeners, something they can carry along after the episode, what would it be?
Get rid of your bucket list, throw it away. And instead, go to that list, find one thing that matters to you the most and start doing it. Whatever that takes, even if it's just the very first step. We didn't get to go on a tandem bicycle ride on the day we thought of it, but we could do something every day to move toward that ride. Maybe it was look up a route, or maybe it was take a ride on the bike, or maybe it was find, the right pants that were going to work for me. Maybe it was try the next seat, whatever it was. You do not want to leave this earth with a list of things that you wished that you had done. It'd be much better to leave this earth doing something toward whatever goal that you were going for. And then you leave this earth wishing, I wish that I had done. You don't want that. So instead of doing that, get rid of the bucket list. If it's worthy to be on a bucket list, then it's worthy for you to be working toward it today.
Burn the bucket list, Teri. I love it.
Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun, Teri. It's really been nice just getting to learn a little bit more about your story. Where can people find your book and connect with you online?
The best place to find me is to go to my website, which is my name, Teri M. Brown, and that's Teri with 1 R.com. There you can find all of my books. You can find, I have a couple of podcasts that I do that you can find there. I have a newsletter you can sign up for. All my social media icons are there. So wherever you are, click on those and find me there. And I even just have a contact me page. Feel free to reach out there. All of my books are available, not only on my website, but you can find them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pretty much wherever you want to buy a book. That's where you'll find it.
Excellent, Teri. Thank you so much for being here today. And looking forward to just keeping in touch.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
All right, Teri, take care. Thank you so much for tuning into the Resilient Author Podcast. I hope today's conversation gave you both inspiration and practical tools for your own journey. If you've been carrying the idea for a book, but haven't started, or you've started and feel stuck, I'd love to invite you to join my 5-day Speak Your Book Challenge. In just 5 days, you'll speak the outline of your first draft and discover how to turn it into a finished manuscript and a published book. You can join anytime at voicetobook.co/challenge. Until next time, keep going, stay resilient, and remember, your story matters.